Good morning, everybody. It's Chonk. I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about Guardian Druid in 10.05 in Dragonflight. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about the strength of Guardian Druids and what they can and cannot do. So I just want to kind of go over my talents, some of the stuff that's going on in 10.05, maybe look at some logs, and kind of just get a general feel where versus the reality versus the perception of druids and guardians in the current iteration of Dragonflight. Because I think low-key, they're probably better than most people think. I'm not going to say that prot warriors, and I have a prot warrior, aren't dominating most Mythic Plus and raids, and even Blood Death Knights and Brewmasters in certain scenarios. But I think Guardian Druids very much hold their own and can complete pretty much all content. So I just want to go over a few things. So first of all, let me bring up here we go. So now we're looking at the patch notes for 10.005. And as we can see here, the Guardian Druid tree has been redesigned. The baseline Ursine Adept, Innervate can now be cast in bear form. There's some new talents, Thorns of Iron, which allows your Iron Fur to do some AE damage. Raise, which replaces Maul with a much weaker version of it in single target, but it lets it hit like an AE conal. So I think if 3 enemies or more, Raise becomes better. Now this is good on some fights, like if you're doing Broodkeeper ads, if you're like in maybe Alcathar's Academy, if you're playing in a fortified week, Raise might be something that you might take. Otherwise, maybe not so much. Moonless Night. This is actually really nice for single target damage. This allows you to have some additional damage put onto the boss when you're mostly for bosses and things like that. And it's a nice little help. Lunar Beam's absolute trash. Don't even worry about it. And they've moved some things around. The big thing you'll hear about a little bit more than anything else is the Incarn nerf. And this is where Incarn used to make Thrash and Mangle's cooldown 100% less, which basically means you cast it on every CD. Now it's only 50%. It's kind of, obviously, it reduces the value of things like Flashing Claws and things like that. And it even makes Pulverize like slightly worse. Some other things in the tree slightly worse as well. But at the same time, I do think it can open up some possibilities. And it's not the worst thing in the world. So yes, you might have to alternate Mangle, which hits 3 targets, and Thrash, like alternate between the two. And in most dungeons, that's mostly fine. But yes, obviously, it's not quite the same as it was before. But again, I do think it opens up some possibilities. And I'll show you why. So going over here into this talent build. This is the talent build I've been running a lot in Mythic Plus and also most fights in the raid as well. And by the way, I just cleared Heroic as Guardian Druid. So again, it's definitely possible. Now, I'm not Mythic Plus rating, but as we'll see in a little bit, there are Mythic Plus Guardian Druids out there that are doing just fine. So, I mean, my class tree, there's nothing really crazy going on over here, so I'm not going to dive into it that much. I pick up Nature's Vigil. I've got Innervate to toss on the healer. I've got Heart of the Wild. I've got Incrap Roar and all the other stuff that you normally would take. But here's where my tree might differ than what you might see on Wowhead or even in some other ones. And again, this is what works for me. I don't take Incarn because I don't think it's worth the improvement, the maximum health, and the extra hits for Mangle in most situations. So I don't take it anymore. And that allows me a little bit of freedom to try out some other things that I think have been working for me. I pick up Thorns of Iron. This talent, as you'll see, it can do anywhere to 5 to 7% of my DPS. That's pretty solid for a 1-point talent. It's about the same, if not slightly more than Brambles, which, yes, I do think it should have a little bit more value, but I do like it. I have also been playing around with Laird Main as well, and in some situations I like it as well. But what I've been doing for a more survivability based build is I don't take Earth Warden. I do take Pulverize, which again, I don't like this talent that much because it takes away 2 Sashi or Thrash, but I take Ursoc's Fury. And Ursoc's Fury, although again, without the ability of Incarn to Thrash, kind of diminishes its value somewhat, I still think it's pretty strong by itself. And here's why. Now, this is an Algathar 11. This is not, again, it's a lowish key. It's not the end-all be-all. But I want to go over a few things. First of all, single target damage-wise, I think Guardian Druids Especially if you look across most logs, Guardian Druids are second place usually in most DPS logs, and that's fine. So in this particular one, I was cranking out about 33k overall, but there's spikes where I'm doing a little bit more. So you can see there, I'm like, let's see, let's go into my details here. This is obviously Algathar, so here's the tree boss where I'm spiking up like 80, 90k, whatever that is up there. And then for the most part, you can see I'm still doing 50k during most periods of fights there. So it's doing all right. This is where we actually had a weird wipe on Croth. The Eagles got really weird and they bolstered up and like annihilated a healer or something, or someone got knocked off. I can't remember. This runs several days old at this point. But again, Thorns of Iron doing about 5% damage, about the same as Brambles. They're neck and neck there. But I also want to look at like damage taken, healing. And you can see Ursoc's Fury is doing 20% of my healing. And what's effective about it, because it's damage absorb, look at the overheal. It's very low. So it really helps mitigate damage. I think it does a really good job. And like you say, I've got almost 50% uptime on it. So it's doing a really good job of mitigating my damage with very, very little overheal. Because if you look at After Wildfire looks great on meters, but it's typically going off, and yes, there are ways to track it where it's just kind of firing off and not always optimal. Now, I could try to hold it a little bit more and try to make it a little bit more optimal, but sometimes when you're trying to build your stacks of Iron Fur, when you're trying to do a maul, whatever, like sometimes you just need to do that, and it's really hard to time it correctly. And maybe if I was a better player, I would, but there you go. Frenzy, Regen, and Loon's favored. Again, they're always going to be strong, but they still have moderate overheal on those talents as well. So again, why don't we look over here? So here's a Primal Council heroic I did last week, and let's go into damage done. And again, I parsed 96%. I did 65k. This is a heroic Primal Council, so I'm doing a decent DPS. The other tank here is a Vengeance Demon Hunter. He's doing 40k. Now he could be doing a little bit better, I guess, if you look at his parse, but still, like 65k is pretty respectable. And if we go into damage taken, again, I'm taking slightly more damage, although a lot of it is absorbed, versus him, where I'm taking 50k per damage per second. He's taking 48k. But again, and our eye level is neck and neck, like one eye level off. So again, I'm actually effectively, yes, of course, it'll be absorbed. I'm taking a little bit less damage than him. I'm mitigating 50%, where he's mitigating 42. And if we go down to healing, I'm healing more than him as well. So again, it's not a one-to-one comparison, but I'm just saying, like, compared to this Vintage Demon Hunter, I'm holding my own, and I'm doing a lot more DPS. So that's one fight. Let's go into Aeronog. Which is basically a mostly single target with, obviously the ads, but still the same thing. Like I parsed at 89 here, so not quite as good. 30k, he did 16k because he was jumping around and doing everything else. But I think damage taken, I take more damage, but I'm still mitigating more damage. And I think I might have had more time on boss. I think my stacks got higher, but either way, I mitigated more. A lot of it was absorbed. And if we go down to healing, it's going to be a very similar story. I'm healing 14k per second, where he's healing 5. And again, Aeronog's an easy fight, so I know it's not the end all be all, but those are some examples of me just playing in heroics and in Mythic Plus. And again, there's probably fights where other tanks are going to do better, but at the end of the day, I think Guardian Druids can very much hold their own. I've completed all content as a Guardian Druid, and it's never been a problem. Now, I don't push 20 plus keys, and yes, I get it. When you're that high of a key level, the little differences between tanks, and again, I understand that Prot Warriors are much stronger. Those are really going to start to parse out. So if you're doing 20 plus keys, even though I know some Guardian Druids have completed like 20s, 21s, and maybe even higher, I haven't looked in a few days. It gets significantly easier with certain kinds of tanks. I'm not going to dispute that, but I think from people like me, where I'm pushing 15, 16, 17s. I'm doing heroic raids. I'm not trying to do mythic raiding. I'm not trying to push over 20. I'll hit 20 by the end of the season just for the portals, but I'm not. That's not part of my regular weekly schedule, so to speak. Right? I think Guardian Druids and any tank in general is going to do just fine. And the Guardian Druid for me it's a lot of fun because you can pump big numbers. So I wanted to look at another thing. So here's Razageth. It's a normal fight. But again, like I parsed the 97. I'm doing 36k DPS. The Vengeance Demon Hunter is doing 21. When it comes to damage taken, I'm actually taking less. I'm mitigating 49%. And again, with healing, you know, I parsed the 90% on healing. I'm doing 17k per second. He's doing 9. So it's just, again, yes, he's playing Vengeance Demon Hunter, which is not necessarily a Prot Warrior or even a Blood DK, which I think Blood DK is actually really shot on Razageth. I have a Blood DK. I play him on Razageth. But I wanted to look at some other things as well. Like, here's Brewkeeper Mythic. And this is just a fight I picked out just going through the Warcraft logs. We can look here. Here's Pumps. Pumps is probably the best Guardian Druid in the world. So, you know, take that with a grain of salt. But he's doing 65k DPS, where his Blood DK, and again, Blood DKs are very suited to Broodkeeper, is doing 39k. So 25,000 DPS less. And to me, survivability, while it's important and mitigation is important, when you're in progression rating, damage matters a whole lot too. And I think this is where if your tank can stay alive, it's about what buffs does he bring and how much damage, what's his damage profile. And yes, if we look here, again, Pumps is mitigating a lot more damage. Now, obviously, because of, if we look here in the healing meter, Waka is he's definitely built for damage when I looked last. But most of his stuff is going to be absorbed, and that's probably from Anti-Magic Shell. Yeah, it's doing a lot. It's doing it when it's important. So don't get me wrong. His heals per second are going to be massive compared to a Guardian Druid, and it's going to hit when it matters. But the more consistent damage mitigation over the course of the fight, and Pumps is definitely doing ads, because if we look at Pumps' build, I'm pretty sure he's got raised. Now, this is a situation where raised is good. Yeah, so he's got raised, and if we look at things he's attacked, I can't even remember how to look at targets, but if we look at things he's attacked, like he's fighting ads. So he's definitely the ad tank in this fight. And this is a fight where I think Guardian Druids do really well. And you can see when he's doing ads, he's spiking up 200, 250k. He's bursting these ads down really hard. Again, sort of an unfair comparison because Pumps is like the #1 Guardian Druid. But you can see that if we go through other logs as well, the same kind of holds true no matter what. That Guardian Druids do solid damage. Their damage mitigation is good or better as most tanks, except for maybe warriors who are extreme outlier. And we can hold our own and complete all levels of content. So, you know, that's where I'm at on Guardian Druid. And I think we're doing a lot better than maybe, again, the perception is when it comes to how things are going. And I think that if you go to Warcraft logs and you sort by tanks, you're going to see obviously a crap ton of warriors. You're going to see a lot of Blood Death Knights, and Brewmasters are really strong. And I think have always been a little strong, and they've had a perception issue in the early part of Dragonflight that I think is starting to mitigate itself now. But again, there's a few Guardian Druids in there that are clearing Mythic bosses and are doing just fine. And I think more than anything, it's the perception, not the actual performance, that's getting in the way of that. Because I have no problems in keys. I have no problems being healed in keys. I've had pug healers and everything else. It's fine. I've cleared the heroic raid as a Guardian Druid. It's been fine. I don't think my healers have struggled. Maybe they have, but they've not complained about it. And again, if we look at the logs, I'm mitigating just as well. Now, again, there might be certain scenarios where a Blood Death Knight is obviously going to be able to mitigate things really, really well, or a warrior is going to be able to, again, pop a certain cooldown that's going to help them a lot. But again, I think Guardian Druids hold their own, and you can complete most content on a Guardian Druid without any difference than any other tank. And again, some of those differences are going to shine when you're talking about like super high-end keys, or again at the top tiers of Mythic progression. There might be some things there that might, you know, pull things in a different direction. But overall, I'm pretty happy with the state of Guardian Druids. Are there changes I wish that could happen? Absolutely. If we look at the tree, I wish Lunar Beam were better. I wish Incarn didn't get nerfed. I wish Pulverize didn't have a negative. There are lots of things in this tree that I can pick apart, but at the end of the day, the content that I want to do, I can do. And for me, that's good enough. It's good enough for now. I do wish more. Now,
Ending on a high note, I did finally do the Mage Tower. I've had my Druid for a couple of expansions, but I've never really played him that much until not Shadowlands, but here in Dragonflight. And so I actually went and got the Fellbear for him, and I'm really happy about it. It's a motivating factor in me wanting to play my Druid more. And it was a fun fight. It took me about an hour and a half to kind of learn it, and I watched a couple of guides, and I had a lot of fun. So I recommend if you're out there, give it a shot. Anyway, that's it for me this week. Again, I think Guardian Druids are in a pretty decent spot. I think of all the tanks, I think the tanks outside of Prot Warrior are actually much closer than people realize, and can handle all forms of content. So don't let it get you down. If you like playing Druid, if you enjoy playing a Druid, play a Druid. I don't have a problem getting into groups. I have just as much of a time getting into groups for mid keys like 15s and 16s than I do as my Druid. So I wouldn't sweat it too much. Anyway, have a good week. See you on Tuesday when it's time for the vault. Talk to you guys later.